Racist flight attendant denies elderly black woman first class. Karma hits back. An elderly black woman, tired yet hopeful, walked toward her first-class seat, a small luxury she had saved for. But in an instant, her joy was crushed. A flight attendant's cold eyes, a cruel smirk, and a single word that would strip away her dignity in front of everyone. Passengers watched in silence as her humanity was questioned, not her ticket. But what none of them knew was that this moment would change everything. Would the humiliation end here, or was karma waiting in the skies above? Her name was Evelyn, 72 years old, with silver hair tucked neatly beneath a scarf she'd worn for decades. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't powerful, but she had lived a life of quiet dignity. For years, she had worked double shifts as a housekeeper, saving every spare dollar for the little joys most people take for granted. This trip was supposed to be one of those joys, a chance to finally fly across the country in comfort, seated in first class, a seat she had paid for proudly after decades of sacrifice. For her, it wasn't just about extra leg room or a warm meal. It was about recognition, a moment to feel that her hard work had finally bought her something more than survival. As she wheeled her small suitcase through the airport, there was a light in her eyes. She rehearsed what it might feel like to sink into that wide leather seat, to sip tea without rushing, to be treated with the same respect as everyone else. But the world doesn't always let people like Evelyn celebrate quietly. Sometimes, prejudice waits in the places we least expect it, hidden behind forced smiles, crisp uniforms, and polite voices that can turn sharp in an instant. She had no idea that the very moment she stepped onto that plane, her dignity, the thing she valued most, would be tested in front of strangers. And this flight would change everything. Evelyn stepped onto the plane with her ticket held carefully between her fingers. Her heart beat with a mix of nerves and pride. First class. 2 words she had dreamed about for years. She walked slowly, her suitcase, rolling behind her, scanning the numbers until her eyes landed on the wide leather seat that finally belonged to her. But before she could settle, a sharp voice cut through her joy. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I see your ticket?" The flight attendant's tone wasn't warm or professional. It was edged with suspicion, as if Evelyn didn't belong there. Evelyn handed it over politely, smiling faintly. The attendant's eyes narrowed. "This is for first class," he said flatly, holding the slip of paper like it was a mistake. "Are you sure this is yours?" Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to listen, but leaning in all the same. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She nodded softly. "Yes, sir. That's my seat." But the man didn't step aside. He crossed his arms, blocking her way. "First class has certain standards. Are you certain you purchased this? Perhaps your seat is in economy." The word struck harder than a shout. The implication was clear. Someone like her, elderly, black, plainly dressed, couldn't possibly belong in the luxury section. A few passengers exchanged glances, their silence speaking louder than any defense. Evelyn's hand trembled, but she refused to lower her gaze. She had worked too long, saved too hard, to let her dignity be stolen in front of strangers. Slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out the receipt, holding it up with steady fingers. "This is my seat." For a brief second, she thought it would end there. But the attendant only smirked, shaking his head. He leaned closer, his voice low but cutting. "People try this all the time. Don't make a scene. Just move to the back where you belong." The words sliced through her like glass. Where you belong. The same phrase she had heard in 100 ways across her lifetime. Whispered in stores, shouted on streets, hidden in polite rejections. A heavy silence filled the cabin. No one spoke. No one intervened. The hum of the engines seemed louder than ever as Evelyn stood frozen, holding her proof, holding her ground, while humiliation burned through her chest. The attendant's hand moved toward her suitcase, as if he would drag it down the aisle himself. Evelyn's knees weakened, but she planted her feet firmly. She would not move. Not this time. And just as the tension reached its breaking point, another voice rose from behind. Strong, commanding, impossible to ignore. The entire cabin turned their heads. Something was about to happen that no one on that flight would ever forget. The cabin was silent, heavy with tension. Evelyn stood frozen in the aisle, clutching her ticket, her hands trembling as the flight attendant's voice grew sharper. His words cut like knives, each one a reminder that he saw her not as a paying passenger, but as someone unworthy of respect. "Ma'am, you need to move. People are waiting," he barked, glancing at the line of passengers behind her. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads in quiet disapproval, but no one spoke up. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Years of being told she was less than, of being pushed aside, of swallowing her pain in silence. They all seemed to crash down on her in this single humiliating moment. Her chest ached as she tried to steady her breathing. She had fought too hard to be here, to claim this small piece of dignity. And yet here she was, stripped of it in front of strangers who chose silence over justice. For the first time in decades, she felt the sting of tears threatening to fall. But Evelyn refused to cry. She would not give him that satisfaction. The flight attendant reached for her suitcase again, his jaw tight with impatience. "Enough of this. Back to economy. Now." And just when it seemed she would be forced to surrender, a voice rang out. Deep, firm, and impossible to ignore. "That seat belongs to her." Every head turned. The authority in that voice was undeniable. Evelyn's heart stopped as the figure stepped forward from the row behind her, eyes locked on the attendant. The air shifted instantly, the balance of power no longer in his hands. For the first time, the flight attendant's confidence faltered, and in that moment, Evelyn realized karma had finally arrived. The cabin was still, every eye fixed on the man who had spoken up. He calmly stepped forward, pulling out his identification. He wasn't just another passenger, he was a senior executive from the airline itself. His voice was steady, unshaken by the tension in the air. "This woman has every right to be in that seat," he said firmly. "And if she isn't treated with the respect she deserves, then this airline will answer for it." Gasps rippled through the plane. The flight attendant's face drained of color, his arrogance collapsing in an instant. For the first time, Evelyn felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. She wasn't alone anymore. The man's authority made it impossible to deny her any longer. Quietly, she placed her bag above her seat, sat down, and adjusted herself with the dignity that had been nearly stolen from her. The attendant tried to mutter an apology, but the damage was done. Everyone had witnessed the truth. His prejudice had been laid bare for all to see. And in that moment, Evelyn's silent resilience spoke louder than any words could. As the flight took off, Evelyn looked out the window. She thought about the years she had endured. Decades of being told she wasn't good enough, of being dismissed or overlooked because of the color of her skin. And yet here she was, seated in the very place someone had tried to take away from her. Not just first class, but first in her own story. This wasn't only about one woman on one flight. It was about every person who has ever been told they don't belong, about every moment when silence allowed injustice to breathe. Evelyn's story is a reminder. Dignity should never be negotiable. And it leaves us with a question that lingers long after the seatbelt signs turn off. When we see someone's humanity stripped away in front of us, will we stay silent, or will we finally speak? Like and subscribe for more video.